Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Futures Committee on this day, on September 9th, 2019. I'm Mayor Wade Troxel, and the Futures Committee, let me just give you a little bit of background about what the Futures Committee is, and that'll help set up what we're doing today. Futures Committee is a subcommittee of council, and joined here with Julie Pignataro and Emily Gorgol, and as council members. And joined with a number of our city staff as well as community members. As you can see, this committee is one of the more popular of our committees for people in our community that like to learn and grow and share with each other. That's, I think, a community value. One of the things that the Futures Committee likes to do and really is premised upon is dealing with issues that aren't currently things that our current council is working on. And so you can picture it as lifting our head up and looking at the horizon and issues that that we're interested in, curious about, that we can pursue and bring in thought leaders and have a community discussion. We like to consider this a think and do tank. So we think about these things and just, get stimulated with ideas and thoughts. And at the end, we have a summary. And Jackie does a great job doing that, but a summary, but also put it in the context of do. So are there some things we might want to think about considering pursuing as it relates to the conversation that we just had? And so that's a little bit of background of the Futures Committee. One of the first items of business is our approving of our minutes from our last meeting. And do I hear a motion to do so?
Yes, I may make a motion to approve the minutes from the July 8th, 2019 Futures Committee.
Second.
Thank you. And all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? So that passes. And with that, we'd like to go around the room and just get a sense of who's in the room with us. And if you would, just state your name. And if representing anybody, please state that. And I'll start with Julie.
I'm Julie Pignataro. I am City Council and represent District 2.
I'm Emily Gorgol, City Council with District 6.
Could you turn on your mic, please?
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Teresa Roach, and I work in human resources for the city.
Hi, wait. My name is Todd Cornell. I'm with Mindful Fort Collins.
Kevin Jones, Fort Collins Area Chamber of Commerce.
Rich? Turn on the button there.
Rich Shannon, retiree, Fort Collins, and community mindfulness advocate.
Christine Nealand, and a community, everything, I think, yeah. Extraordinaire, that's what you are, Chris. Hi, I'm Nina Bodenhammer with the City of Fort Collins, the Director of City Give.
Gary Schrader, Fort Collins Utilities, and mindfulness interested person.
Adana Barbieri, I'm a mindfulness instructor, currently living in Longmont.
John Barbieri, who will be moving to Jackson. Also done mindful training, and we just completed a wonderful program with the Sustainability Area Service Department.
Sorry. Perry McMillan, I am supervisor with Mediation and Restorative Justice Services with the city. I'm also a long-time meditator and a community mindfulness advocate.
I'm Michael Wilborn. I'm the Dean of Students at Poudre Community Academy, and I'm a member of the Poudre School District Mindfulness Council.
I'm Margit Henschel, Center for Mindfulness at Colorado State University.
I'm Sue Schneider with the Larimer County Extension. And I'm Susan Davids with United Way of Larimer County.
Matt Robinalt with the Downtown Development Authority.
Gary Goodman, UC Health, Integrative Medicine Medical Director and supporter of mindfulness. We use mindfulness-based stress reduction for our cancer patients, and here's our trainer.
Anne-Marie Bowman, I'm the trainer.
Marion Tiveros, VP for Diversity at Colorado State and 40-year plus meditator and advocate for mindfulness.
Angie Rhodes with the City of Fort Collins Wellness Program.
Lynn Sanchez, City of Fort Collins Employee Wellness Program.
Eric Holsapple, LC Real Estate Group, and I also Director of Living in the Gap, a leadership development program.
I'm Caroline Mitchell. I get to work in sustainability services on waste reduction recycling at the city.
I'm Laura Nelson, President of the Fort Collins Area Interfaith Council.
I'm Pam Turner, and I'm co-director of the Fort Collins Shambhala Meditation Center and meditation instructor.
Eddie Hopkins, pastor, Peak Community Church. That's it.
I'm Joseph Moore. I'm a pastor at First Pres and also one of the leaders of the Interfaith Council.
Marianne Bear, World Wisdoms Project board member. We often offer programs and experiences on the topic of mindfulness.
I'm Sarah Moranowitz, the Community Programs Director at Bohemian.
Cheryl Zimuk, Executive Director of Bohemian.
My name is Mac. I'm a professor at the university and longtime mindfulness advocate.
I'm Christy Valesky with Fort Collins Police.
I'm Beth Souter, Social Sustainability with the city.
I'm Jelaine Pittman, City of Fort Collins Economic Health.
Sana Kendall, City of Fort Collins Economic Health.
Shannon Hine, City of Fort Collins Economic Health. Katie McLaren, Environmental Services with the City of Fort Collins.
Victoria Shaw, Sustainability Services.
Wendy Williams, City Manager's Office.
Good afternoon, Dean Klingner, Planning, Development, Transportation at the city.
Hi, Jeff Swoboda, the Police Chief.
Hi, I'm Greg Yeager. I'm the Deputy Chief of Police.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jeff Mihalik. I'm the Deputy City Manager here in Fort Collins.
Great. And I'll turn it over to Jackie Kozak-Thiel, and great to have everyone here and a lot of friends in the room. Thanks.
Yes, I just thought about how many friends in the room that we've worked on in so many different ways in the city, and but not maybe under the common thread of mindfulness, and didn't even know about a lot of people's work in that space. So really awesome. And I, as I heard who all is in the room, if we can capture that on the sign-up sheet, that will just really help to know who's interested in the community. So I wanted to start with gratitude. I'm so thankful to the speakers, which you'll hear a bit about and from soon, from Jackson, Wyoming, and Flint, Michigan, the double Sarahs, one without an H, one with an H, Sarah Flitner and Sarah Sullivan, and we're just so thankful for you coming to our community. So just wanted to thank you for making the trip. And I wanted to just share the origin story of this Futures Committee meeting a little bit. So you heard from some of our folks that run the wellness. It's an award-winning wellness program here at the City of Fort Collins. I've been very fortunate to offer a bi-monthly mindfulness practice as part of that program that is attended and open to all city employees. Todd Cornell, who's here, has been one of our gracious instructors of that as well. Thank you, Todd, from Mindful Fort Collins. And through that teaching process, I connected with Julie Bruin, who is the CEO, the executive director of our housing authority, Housing Catalyst, who did a pilot with her team as well as with residents of Red Tail Ponds, which is one of the permanent supportive housing projects here in Fort Collins, and was really amazed with the results of that. And she, along with Gail Marie Kimmel, who many of you know in the community, directed me to the Barbieris, who mentioned their instructors from Longmont, and they graciously offered, kind of designed with me a program for city employees that Human Resources and Sustainability piloted and tested earlier this year. So that was kind of the first of that. And from that, John Barbieri introduced me to the Mindful Cities initiative that is starting to take shape and has been responsive to interest in cities across the country. And there's an early cohort, and we're going to be learning from two of the champions in that cohort in Jackson, Wyoming, and Flint, Michigan today. So that was one seed of this. The other seed, I also want to thank Rich Shannon, who I think is largely responsible for how popular this particular Futures Committee meeting is in terms of sharing this opportunity to come to these open sessions that we have with our Council Futures Committee about the topic of a future of a mindful, compassionate Fort Collins and what seeds we might plant today for that. And I know our city manager, Darren Atterbury, is really sad he couldn't be here today. I talked to him on the phone. And I reminded him that part of this seed was planted at the State of the City for the last 2 years, actually. And the mayor and Darren talked about, you know, everything that we're experiencing as a city right now and everything we anticipate in the future, that we're rapidly growing. And one of the bottom line questions at the State of the City was, how do we preserve our friendliness, our connection to one another as we grow? And that what Darren was talking about, he's like, I know we're going to plan, you know, we're going to do our plans. We're going to do what we say in terms of planning. We're a plan committee that builds our plans. He said, but what I think keeps me up at most at night is, are we still going to hold the door for one another? Are we still going to really see each other as people, as community members? And so that question from State of the City, I know, is what intrigued Rich about, you know, what's the answer to that? How do we stay friendly? How do we stay caring for each other in Fort Collins? And one topic for this future dialogue was what some learnings from other cities and Mindful Cities Initiative and learnings here in this incredible local representation that we have. And we know this isn't everyone in the community that's interested in this, but just this amazing response to this, we know there's a lot of great work happening in Fort Collins as well. So kind of what to expect today is I'm going to just give a high-level sharing of what Mindful Cities Initiative is all about, some slides that were shared with me from the Foundation of the Mindful Society, and just to kind of set the stage about this. And then we'll go into hearing from our two champions, and there'll be questions and answers with the committee members, and then as time allows, with anyone who's interested. So I think I don't have my back to you all, but maybe can I just say next slide? Is that okay? So we can go to the next slide. So just to kind of ground, and I would say I'm a mindfulness student and practitioner, and I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to share with my colleagues here in Fort Collins. But I know there's people with far deeper expertise in this audience, and so my sharing is really meant to be in this place where I'm still studying as well. But the Mindful Cities Initiative is really in response to that mindfulness is happening more and more in the mainstream. We're hearing it happening in the private sector, a lot of different programs in the public sector here in Fort Collins and beyond. There's a lot of work, programs actually being designed in certain corporations. I think Sarah Sullivan might touch upon some of the learnings Flint had because of the program developed in Google. And so lots there. And then I think what I definitely learned when I went to Jackson was the deep work that's happening in the health and education sectors, which I know we have some representation here, and that the practice and response of mindfulness, there's great diversity in terms of geography of cities and communities that are interested in this across the country, and the participants in terms of age and different types of communities. So the local champions is what we're going to be focusing on today in terms of our learning. We know as a community and as a city organization, we often are looking to other communities for promising practices as we're learning together. And that those local champions represent everything from community volunteers to C-suite executives, former elected officials, foundations. There's lots of different ways the champions are taking shape. And then in terms of what the goal is of why folks are looking to mindfulness for this question of how do we stay connected, how do we stay friendly, social emotional learning, lots of different goals from health performance, happiness, kind of all those mentioned. And innovation is another piece, all the different values that different places are really turning to as the reason why this might be a promising practice for communities. Next slide. So I talked about that in terms of the reasons that there's some values that mindfulness helps to deepen, but there's also something we talked a lot about in Jackson, these stressors that are happening at an individual level now, and as we think about the changes that we're anticipating in the future, but also kind of the community level stressors. I mentioned permanent supportive housing, the community level stressors of homelessness, childcare, future events like climate change. There's lots of different things that folks are thinking about in their communities, and the stress and strain on that from an individual all the way to a collective level as a community. And then the other piece of this, and we were talking about this over lunch today, is really kind of the science behind this. I heard the great work that's being done at UC Health with cancer patients. There's a lot of science around how you can train your brain, and that kind of the physical fitness and the mental fitness. And I know mental health is a key priority of our community as well, and so the role that this work can have in responding to increasing our mental health. One picture that really helped me wrap my head around this at Jackson was Amishi Jha, one of the researchers who was a visiting, and Sarah will probably touch on this a bit more, she's a visiting researcher from Miami who's worked with the military, and her work's been featured in the New York Times, among other places. She showed a picture of a historical picture of women that kind of looked like suffragettes on a bicycle, and then she showed a picture of a modern day spin class. And she said, if back then people were told, you're gonna go on a bike that one of the wheels is removed, you're not gonna go anywhere, and you're gonna ride for 45 minutes, people would be like, what are you talking about? Why would we ever do that? And she said there's 300,000 literature articles now about the importance of training our physical bodies, and I think there's less than 10,000 about mental fitness and training mind. And so there's real opportunity there to think through what does the future look like in terms of our mental fitness. Next slide. So this is just a basic definition. The ability to be fully present with whatever arises, paying attention, aware, and not overly reactive. It's present in all human beings and can be trained, as we just talked about, and have been mentioning some of the benefits in terms of mindfulness-based stress reduction, in the health field, a lot around chronic pain, mental health field with trauma, community level resilience and innovation, performance, all of those different sorts of benefits, and kind of circling back to that exercise our body and we exercise our mind. So I might just invite everyone for a moment, because we've hardly all been sitting a lot today. I'm just going to invite everyone to stand up for a moment and kind of take a quick moment to, as it said, the ability to be fully present with whatever arises and paying attention. So perhaps just it might be the first breath you've even noticed today. I know for me it's been a busy day, so just taking a moment to take a breath and checking in with yourself. With a few intentional rhythms of inhalation and exhalation. And after you have a moment to just check in with your own breath and self, allowing that to expand to notice the full room around you and being present to that. And with that, we can just sit back down, maybe a bit more attuned. So to the next slide, Brittany. that was something, and I'm sure Sarah will touch upon it, that I loved in Jackson is we did mindful minutes throughout the summit and becoming Jackson Whole, and many different types and ways to do that. We do stretch sessions here at the city. There's many different moments to just kind of interrupt and train our mind to be present. So we can skip through this slide. This is just, these slides will be public, but this is just a bit about the Foundation for Mindful Society that is part of supporting this effort and has been working as consulting support for these city champions. So if there's questions, the Sarahs will be helpful with that. But I think, the piece that we wanted to highlight here too is that the shift about the mainstream is also about kind of the individual to the greater level. And so that it's not just about us in isolation, but it's about us connected as a community. And so that the stresses we might feel individually are actually symptoms of a larger body of a society of experiencing those stressors. And that, again, learning from these other two cities, the incredible multi-sector connections that are emerging from this, and just hearing where all these different folks in the room are from in our own community. And yes, I've worked with you on many different things, but not on this before. And so connecting the silos and just that civic engagement, how we engage with one another, and that's important in terms of reimagining engagement for our council's priorities, how it can be transformed through this. And so Mindful Cities was really emerging in response to all that. Next slide. So these are just kind of the key elements of the approach, and that will be really, I think, discussed in terms of how it's manifested on the ground in Jackson and Flint, so I won't spend much time on that. Next slide. And this is about kind of the structure of it. So again, I won't touch on that, but these are all just things in case you're interested in Mindful Cities initiative more generally. And that the pilot cities are Jackson, Flint, Michigan, and Boston. And I just want to mention that another city that's emerged that they're really trying to go slow to go fast and really starting with these early adopters. But another city that's had interest in their thinking of working with is Parkland, Florida. So if you think about what's going on in these different communities and the diversity of these communities, and this is a response, was really interesting to me, I know. So next slide. And this is kind of about the role that the Mindful Cities Initiative will play in supporting cities. And that, again, that will be shared more through the city examples. Next slide. And then obviously we're going to hear from Flint and Jackson. Next slide. And so I just thought that this was really amazing. So I wanted to just share because Flint and Jackson are incredible, and I'm so excited for you to learn what I've been learning in talking with these two wonderful people. But a few other examples. So in Oklahoma, a state legislator started a mindfulness center, and there's actually a mindfulness day in the city each year. In Wichita, Kansas, Congressman Tim Ryan started the Mindful America Foundation and has really focused the work on vets experiencing homelessness. In Menlo Park, there's all 50 police have gone through a mindfulness training, and there's a mindful badge in that community. In Las Cruces, they're really focusing on working with immigrant families and households and as part of this work. In Chicago, it's actually a large Fortune 100 company that is trying to drive the work in that city. So just kind of the diversity in terms of where this is emerging. And then there's a lot of national interest too in terms of mindful Rotary clubs and various foundations that are working with that. So just wanted to highlight kind of there's these two cities that we'll deep dive into, but lots of activity around the country. So next slide. And then I just wanted to read this because I thought it was so lovely in terms of what, if we think about a mindful, compassionate Fort Collins, now and into the future, a mindful city, what does it mean? Civic leaders acting as local champions and community organizations overseeing mindfulness programs that support and complement their work to foster a resilient population, resulting in healthy individuals enjoying caring relationships and living in a kind, compassionate, and flourishing community. So I thought that that was a really good grounding just concept for us as we go into hearing examples from Jackson and Flint. And so before I turn it over to Sarah, I'll say that when I learned about this, I was like, wow, that's so cool, and wanted to know more, of course. And I met Sarah over email at first, and I said, I'd love to come check out what you're doing in Jackson. And she said, I don't know, I'm really worried about capacity, space capacity, if we can invite folks from outside Jackson. And then we talked, she said, okay, you're coming. And so I was really grateful that she welcomed me to be an observer city. And I'm really excited for you all to hear what I experienced in Jackson. So Sarah was the former mayor of Jackson, Wyoming. She's run Flitner strategies for over 20 years, and is a practitioner herself and has been the champion of becoming Jackson whole. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Great. Thank you. How am I mic'd? Is there something I need to do? Okay, great. I never did get the hang of that, Mayor. I see that you did, so well done. I want to share that Jackie got to come to Jackson because she promised me that she would not eat lunch if it came to that. So I'm just so impressed and so gratified to be in this room that is obviously so full of leaders that are exhibiting the best of heart and best of mind. That is what Jackie demonstrated when she came. You're lucky to have her. But that is what we're about, right? That is this exploration that we're on. Becoming Jackson whole. When I started this conceptually, I didn't think that I'd have to say every single time becoming Jackson whole with a W. So our big marketing dollars and rebranding dollars are coming soon, and I'm sure we'll take care of that. But it really is a pillar, a foundational interest, this idea of exploring what whole leadership is, and how whole and integrated leadership can sustain wellness and emotional well-being at scale across communities. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. Remind me your name and Brittany. I'll probably call you like Melanie and Sally, and just keep advancing the slides, okay? Tom? Yeah, next slide, please. Okay, so this is our community. This is Jackson Hole. I want you to know that I ascended 11 miles just for you so you could see that picture. It's actually so I could brag about it a little bit. It was my only long hike of the summer, I'll admit. You have a lot of amazing vistas and gorgeous scenery in Colorado, even bigger mountains than the Tetons. So when you look at this beautiful scenery, you know that that's part of the story, but it's not the whole story, is it? We, like many Colorado mountain towns, are home to exploration and that pioneering spirit. The energy that draws us to communities like this is big, bold energy. I certainly feel that in this room under your leadership, Mayor. I also know what you know, which is behind these beautiful pictures, there are other stories. Like many mountain towns, our statistics, when you get behind the pretty pictures, tell stories of a lot of human suffering. I was going to do a practice, but I'm just going to offer out a few. I struggled with this when I was in office, and I am a student. When I hear 40 years, I say, wow. I feel fortunate to be in the room with you, and my manners aren't probably as good as yours. I found it really helpful for the council and myself when faced with very difficult meeting situations, as you come across, to have micro practices that we could share. And my favorite one was in the face of someone with whom I disagreed or an interest that was strident, I would hold the gaze of the person commenting at the podium, and I would take one deep breath before I responded in any way. So we can do that, just one deep breath. And what I am sending to you is gratitude for your invitation today. See, that's only a little weird. We can do that, okay? We can do it. All right. So next slide, please. So here you are, Fort Collins. You are experiencing an emergence in this tech hub world. I'm hearing that Fort Collins is attracting a lot of tech innovation. So here we are at the dawn of what many people are calling the fourth industrial revolution. We are facing impacts from artificial intelligence, 3D printing, really the fusing of what it means to live in a digital world, the physical world, the human world. And this is happening at a pace that at least we experience, and I don't think you're any different, that challenges our very notion of what it is to be human, and certainly what it is to be a responsible leader. Many believe that we're on a trajectory for transforming the way that we do everything, from running government, to managing businesses, and certainly the ways in which we engage with one another at the community level. It won't be a surprise to you that economists warn on a daily basis that we should expect more disconnection, more disruption in the job cycles, and certainly an increase in social tensions if we don't do something. At no time, at least in my memory, and I guess it's longer than I thought based on could you do something about the camera at the building next door? This is definitely not what I look like. It's so shocking when it's what you look like and you're like, wait, I remembered high school. I looked so much better. So recently, speaking of this sort of collision course of what it is to be human in a time that we are experiencing this exponential growth in technology, I recently addressed a group of MBA students, and their anxiety was palpable as they made presentation after presentation about joining a workforce where their requirement would be to create machines and machine learning that would make them obsolete. Can you imagine the anxiety if you were 22 and many of you work at CSU, what that would feel like to be entering into a world that is changing with such rapidity? Next slide, please. So I'll talk about Jackson again for a moment. Again, like Fort Collins and like Flint, beautiful, full of talented, smart people, healthiest big game population in the lower 48, great food, vibrant arts culture, looks great, right? Well, the median family income is $81,000, and the median home price is $2.7 million. 1 in 10 of the people in our community are food insecure. They're hungry. We have one of the highest suicide rates in the state of Wyoming, which is higher than the national average, and I noticed looking at your stats, you share that. This is not just a problem of rich and poor, though. Our students, and no matter where they are on the scale of poverty or affluence, are suffering from anxiety and stress at levels we have never seen in our community. Again, following trends that I bet you are experiencing. Obviously, this is deep suffering for our kids. I have 2 teenage boys. That explains why I don't look 21 anymore. I've got to stop that. I am concerned, obviously, for their suffering, truly the anxiety and their depression and those rates, but also think about their limited cognitive function and their ability to learn the things that we need to teach them and learn the things that leaders of the next generation or healers or doctors or teachers need to be able to know in order to function and lead in society. So, the thing that I'll say over and over again, working with these two just completely stellar women, people say Flint, Michigan, Jackson, Wyoming, Fort Collins, what do they have in common? Well, a lot. Minus a few very minor statistics and a major lead crisis, which Sarah will address. Our statistics look very similar. As a matter of fact, I noticed in Fort Collins, Larimer County, right? We share the same number one public health crisis is, we call it mental health something, and you call it emotional wellness, I believe. I like your terminology better, frankly. But we're zeroing in on the same sets of problems, and I just applaud your leadership in visioning out. So we're at this intersection of technology and human skills, so what do we do about it? Well, in Jackson, and this is not a new story, and it's not my story, to quote Willa Cather. This is a story being told and retold in communities all over the country. But human beings have something that machines don't have, in addition to hearts and all kinds of things that we could talk about if we didn't need to be businesslike and, decorous, right? So we're exploring the kinds of language and points of entree that will allow serious people to come into this conversation and get what we're saying about mental fitness, because it's a real thing. So human beings have an ability to focus their attention. We have an ability, if we practice, to put our attention where we want it and keep it there with some limited success. Machines do not have that ability to intend to put their attention somewhere. So there is that reason that we got very fixated on the science, on partnering with people like Amishi Jha, because we wanted to be able to talk about building that attentional muscle so that you could then put your attention to the problem at hand, or the lesson in the classroom, or the patient in front of you. And we are getting a lot of traction with that kind of language, and I would encourage all of you to, if you're interested, watch Dr. Amishi Jha's TED Talk. Her last name is Jha. So we're just looking for ways to help people understand that these mental fitness exercises are very accessible, not expensive, and available to anyone who can breathe. So it turns out it's kind of handy. So some of these challenges I'll try to go through fairly quickly, but we're plugged in. It's too much. Our brains didn't evolve to be able to take in so much information and still be optimal. As a matter of fact, many of you might know this. Harvard did a study, and it's replicated about 3 times, that evidenced the fact that at any given time, how many of you can fill in the statistic, X percentage of us are paying attention to the task at hand? Has anybody heard this? Want to guess? How many of us are paying attention? What percentage of us right now in this room, for instance? Say? 12? Wow, I really suck. Only 12? Jeez, I thought you were so friendly over there. So she stole my thunder, and it was 47%. I thought that was very shocking, but apparently not. I did think that was shocking. That about half of us, and thank you for being brave enough to participate. You gave us a good laugh, and laughter is good for focusing attention. Half of us in classrooms, half of us performing surgeries, flying planes, interacting with our kids, half of us are paying attention to what's going on at any given time. Probably I've lost 3 slides ago. Would you please advance a couple? And Sarah, I'm going to be careful not to take your time. The last one, just the only point is the human mind is built to wander and scan for danger, but it's not good for us. It's not healthy. It's stress. It floods our systems, and if we are overwhelmed or triggered all the time, our system is not designed to be able to deal with that in a healthy way. So what our answer is to figure out, all right, knowing that we have a tendency to mind wander, and knowing that mostly we're not mind wandering for positive, like how many of you have thought, oh my gosh, when I am 82 years old, in the future sometime, life is going to be so great, right? Or, wow, 10 years, that meeting last week, I handled it so well, I did everything perfectly, I feel so good about. We don't do that. When we time travel, it is rumination, it's worry, it's stress, it's telling our systems, red alert, something dangerous. So we have to build those mental muscles, build the neural networks that allow our brains to actually connect out of that mind wandering into brain centers that help us innovate, create, connect with others. So Becoming Jackson Hole is an initiative that we devised, envisioned to connect the different sectors, and I'm so excited to see how many different sectors are here today. One of our greatest champions is our Chief of Police. He's levitating behind me, your Chief of Police. I have to say, so I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, Chief, but it's really, really interesting to have people who are sort of outside the usual, who aren't walking around in flowy skirts. talking about the benefit of this. And I think it's really incredible when you have leaders like this show up and say, I want to learn, or I want to share this, or I want to do better by my people because you all deserve it. I'm inspired by that. So what do we want to do? We want to empower our community members by helping them develop capacities through adoption of mindfulness. Many of you are so expert. A lot of people in Jackson first started asking, why mindfulness? Because it's proven to be sort of the best mental fitness exercise that we know about so far to develop those social learning capacities. Next slide, please. So remember the MBA students, they calmed right down when I shared with them a couple of things, including the Future of Jobs report that's put out by the Davos Economic Forum every couple of years. 10 years ago, there was not one single social skill, not one, now what they're calling the power tools of the new economy, no human skills on the top 10 recruiting list of skills to recruit for. As of 2016, emotional intelligence skills, like the ones you see listed up here, made half of them, and the prediction is that by next year it will be 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. So that means engineering, analytical skills, the kinds of machine learning skills are being replaced in terms of what companies want to recruit humans for. And the good news is they're human skills. They're capacities that we can develop. So, as I look at these social skills and human skills, empathy and compassion and social connection, and they used to be called the soft skills, which many of us, especially women in leadership and business positions, did not feel comfortable with. I thought they were the most important skills. I still think that's true. I want people to understand that we're not talking about being nicer or smiling at more people in the grocery store. Although I highly encourage that practice too. That's scientifically proven to work as well. But I'm talking about methodically, relentlessly, tenaciously pursuing the science and building the neural networks individually so that at community member by community member and leader by leader, you have the health and functionality in your organizations. You can skip to 2 slides, Brittany, because the mindfulness definition we already have. Let's talk in my last couple of minutes about our model in case there's anything of value to you. And I have a lot to learn from many of you, and I wrote down your names, so be warned. We did a community assessment. First, I wanted to know, did anyone agree? Were there people out there who thought like you all think? Or were a few of us on an island? We interviewed 50 of our community leaders that would look like a lot of you, elected civic, business leaders, chamber presidents, so forth. And then we did another 350 or so online survey instruments. We learned, yes, guess what? The human brain kind of works the same way. It's a little bit overwhelmed, and people are hungry for solutions and wanted to proceed in social emotional learning and mindfulness training. We did site visits to innovators in the field, and that is how I met my friend Sarah Sullivan. You'll hear about their incredible work. That is how we met Amishi Jha. I encourage you to give Jackie a big leash and send her out there to network. She does a great job. She makes us all want to move to Fort Collins if things get bad in our town. We promise to keep it under the $250,000 you're planning for, though. But there's just so much to connect around, and it gives those of us who are kind of bushwhacking out there a lot of juice to have community. And finally, we did this summit, which is something I think Jackie's really thinking about, where we brought together, the CEOs and presidents, the highest level leaders in all the sectors: law enforcement, civic, business, nonprofit, National Park Service, emergency response, etc., and a couple of opinion leaders from their organizations. We wanted them to hear about the science. Most of them do not have deep practices. There's a lot of athleticism and activity in our community, but it's hard for communities like this to go internal, and of course that's the frontier for the future as far as we can tell. Again, I'm happy to answer questions about what transpired there. I'll just cut to the chase, next slide please, and tell you that our next steps, those are, we've got it on camera, our local leaders doing mindfulness exercises, pictures of that too, so you're not alone. Next stage is a group of the 100 or so summit people are going to be trained in Amishi Jaw's minimum daily dosage training. We're going to test out in her 4-week program. It's 2 hours of class time for 4 weeks and then 10 minutes of daily practice that moves up to 15. And we're going to do a very rigorous science-based pre and post assessment. Did it move the needle? What we think we're seeing a lot of excitement around is the cross sector, like the police chief really exploring leadership challenges with the CEO of the hospital, and then their HR directors and opinion leaders within their organizations also having that experience. So we're really trying to build an integrated kind of foundation rather than a pillar approach, although that has been shown to be successful too if there's a school district, for instance, that's really excited. Next slide, please. The final thing I'll tell, then after that training happens, we're going to take the especially excited folks and train trainers. Here's another a fact I'll share, that people learn best from their sector, from within their sector. So we like to innovate together, but if I'm really going to adopt, I'm a cop, I'm going to learn better from the chief of police than I am from some academic at CSU, except you're HR, right? No, okay. There I go again. So final lessons learned. You're already doing this. You spend a lot of time listening. There's so much good energy and leadership in this room, I can tell. We spent a year figuring out who was doing what and what could we learn from them. We prioritize collaboration almost above all else. As I like to say, this is a barn raising. This is not a movie starring John Wayne. We need each other, and we have to learn from each other and lean on each other if we're going to make this happen. I say keep the skepticism, but trust the science. So be skeptical. Somebody asked me during the summit, what if you do this assessment and we didn't move the needle? You know, we do this 4-week training and people get worse. I said, well, I guess we'll try something else. We're not trying to make people get worse. This I know. But I do have a lot of trust in the science. So I suspect, like many of you do, that we'll show some progress and we'll probably learn where we can do better. Don't wait for perfection to take action. I don't need to tell you that. I can see that. And then I like to say you can't preach what you don't practice. So it doesn't have to look the same, and it doesn't need to be decades of meditation practice on a cushion or even formal mindfulness practice. It can be just paying attention to your own moods and what triggers you and how you show up as your best self at a city council meeting, and so do those things. And I will say in closing that the science of optimizing your brain does make a lot of sense to me. So even those small micro practices of taking a deep breath, while it looks odd to your community at first, it is contagious, and they will feel that in the room, and you will have an opportunity to talk about what you're doing and why. I applaud your courage, because when you really care as much as it's obvious that you do about your constituents from Jackie's reports, I know that you will go out on the edge and help us make this not only not weird, but really accessible, because it helps. So with that, I just want to thank you so much. I hope I didn't go over time. I wasn't watching very closely. Obviously, I'm excited about talking about this topic with people who are leading and protecting what we love about our Western communities, and I just want to thank you so much for your hospitality, and you, Mayor, for your invitation today.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
You're welcome. With that, the other Sarah with. Yeah, it goes without saying. Go ahead and introduce yourself, I guess, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Mayor and City Council members and the community at large for coming out to hear about this important topic. I'm really honored to be here, and before I begin, I'll just invite us to stand once more for a micro practice.
It's good. I'm getting used to this.
So you can see on the screen a picture of our beautiful downtown, and unfortunately we don't have mountains, and so the practice that I'll lead is just a way to find some inner mountain. So what I'd like you to do is just stand in a way that feels stoic, perhaps strong like a mountain. Feel your feet rooted on the ground. Just feel the strength in your core. Imagining perhaps your shoulders as peaks of mountains. And just take a minute to check in. Drawing your attention to your breath or the feeling of your feet anchored on the floor. And then your eyes can be open or closed, but either way, just notice the others in the room and think of the mountain range of support you have in your community. So many people that you're standing shoulder to shoulder with and in this together with. And then as you're ready, go ahead and sit down. Thank you. So at first glance, Flint and Jackson Hole and Fort Collins may not have a lot in common, but I do think, as Sarah and Jackie said, we share many similar stressors and also a collective desire to be healthier and more mindful and more compassionate. And so I'm really excited to share about the journey we've been on as a community to be more mindful and compassionate and healthier. And it's definitely more of a destination than a journey with an endpoint, just like mindfulness is a practice and never something that we'll just achieve. So it's in that spirit that I'll share where we are. And in many ways, we've been doing this work for a long time, and in many other ways, we're just beginning. Next slide, please. Oh, and I guess I will say, do you mind going back for a minute? This is our downtown, our Crim Fitness Foundation where I work is that building on the far left. And then this is Saginaw Street downtown. And we have these beautiful steel archways that light the brick roads. And then on the right-hand side, there's the University of Michigan Ann Arbor campus. And the Flint River goes just behind that last arch there. So just to kind of ground you in our downtown. Next slide, please. Thank you, Brittany. So we aim to support individual and community wellness, and there's a lot of challenges that Flint has faced, and we could spend all day unpacking those, and I don't want to do that, but I also don't want to portray that mindfulness is something that we just focus on being calm and not being angry about injustice or institutional racism or disinvestment, that there are real struggles, and mindfulness is really about embracing the full catastrophe of all of life, and just being more aware and more able to choose a response and how to handle that emotion that we're feeling or resolve a situation that may be arising. So today, I'm excited to share about the incredible mindful and compassionate leaders who have really stepped up in the face of the water crisis and the decades before that of challenges to really take these challenges and turn them into a model public health program that is making possible things that had never been possible in our community before. We have universal preschool, we have a thriving year-round farmers market, we have mobile medical clinics, we have a huge network of community gardens, we have so many needed mental health supports and interventions, and the Mindfulness Initiative is one of those structures that are efforts that is bringing people together to explore how we can co-create a healthier community. Next slide, please. So the arches you saw from that first slide, this is a close-up, and they actually say Vehicle City because Flint was the home of GM's first factories, and in 1980, I think we had 85,000 people working at GM and in a population of 200,000. So cars have been a big part of our community, but we also are having a lot of other economic revitalization and new businesses going in. And so it's fun to be creative about what else could those arches say. And so this is just a generated image, but we imagine in the future it might want to say Mindful City. Let's see. So why are we turning to mindfulness in Flint? There's two key reasons. One is the research, and the other is the experience with pilot projects that we've experienced in our community and the positive impact that we're seeing through our own eyes. And so this is a pretty outdated slide because it shows the amount of peer-reviewed mindfulness research publications. I guess when we were proposing to our board in 2011 if we could start mindfulness programming, they said, well, where was this? I haven't heard about this, 20 years ago. And we said, well, the research is pretty new. In 1980, there were only a handful of studies. And in 2016, there were close to 1,000 on PubMed. And now it's closer to, I think it's about 9,000 now. So it's quite a rapidly growing. The neuroscience is really incredible. And many of the reasons that the research is highlighting, Jackie and Sarah already shared. But in Flint, we're also looking at mindfulness as a mitigation for the impact of lead for young people, especially the prefrontal cortex, the area of our brain that is responsible for executive decision making, can be weakened by lead and cause higher rates of ADHD and challenges with self-regulation. And mindfulness is shown to suggested to strengthen the area of the brain. And then also just the toxic stress and trauma. Mindfulness can be shown as a way to interrupt some of the adverse childhood experiences and trauma as well. So we're looking into that effort. Next slide, please. So this shows our theory of change, that the research is really showing mindful individuals and are focused on that mainly. But there's more and more research on the impact of mindful leaders and compassionate leaders in organizations and what that does to the bottom line of a business or the overall empathy in a community and or the suspension rates in a school. And so we're really fascinated about exploring that and then seeking the current research and also contributing to it, and especially around a whole community or city. I don't think there's a lot of research yet there, so it's an exciting field to be exploring. And so the Foundation for a Mindful Society, I love they say this, mindfulness training programs, as much as roads and bridges, can be part of rebuilding this infrastructure. And in Flint, we are almost done replacing our water pipes 5 years after the crisis began. And there's a lot of infrastructure and investment happening physically in the city. But there's almost, I would say, an equal amount paid to how do we work together as a community and address some of the inequities and challenges that we're facing. And mindfulness is a great practice to hold space for difficult conversations and just bring awareness and presence to both the challenges and the solutions. So it's easy to count how many water pipes have been replaced or how many roads or bridges have been built, but it's much harder to look at how mindful or compassionate we are, especially at an organizational level or a community level. And so this is a pretty rough slide that we're working to improve with our national and local researchers, but it's indicators that we're looking at. In green and red are things we know will or hope to improve across all sectors. And then within each sector, there's indicators that we're looking at measuring. Education is the area where we started our mindfulness programming in Flint at the Crim Fitness Foundation in 2011. So we have seen reduced suspension rates, and we have seen students' focus improving. And I think like 73% of students in 4th grade felt that mindfulness helped them improve their ability to focus, and 61% felt that helped them avoid fights. And so we do have some initial data from our pilot studies that is showing some positive impacts, and teachers are seeing it help them deal with burnout and stress and the demands that they're facing. And then we haven't worked yet as much in healthcare and business, and with our city and community leaders, we have a bit to share about that, but we're still exploring exactly what we'll measure with those efforts. So this just shows our organization is very trusted and been in our community for a long time, more than 40 years. And it started focused on physical fitness as a road race to raise money for the Special Olympics. And then our visionary CEO and board made the decision to expand to really support individual and community health. And then mental fitness was added in 2011 when we piloted mindfulness programming. And the aim was just to work in the schools, but the parents were curious about what their children were learning and wanted to be exposed to it, and educators were asking for more training. And so it quickly evolved into more of a community-wide program. And then in 2016, in response to the water crisis, we did expand and launch a community-wide initiative. And then in 2018 is when we engaged our mayor, and the city expressed support to launch the Mindful Cities initiative. And just this year in May is when we had our first community summit. So this shows just the number of people. The Crim Fitness Foundation, 15,000 people run the race every year, and our community has around 100,000 people now, so it's a large number of people involved. And then we have nutrition programming, we have safe and active community programming, we have community education. So there's a lot of different things our organization does. And the Mindfulness Initiative currently engages about 8,000 people a year through free community classes and programs and events. And then we're also working to look at policy systems and environmental changes and how to advocate for investments in some of these areas that we think will lead to more individual and community wellness and transformation. So this picture on the left is the lobby of our office. It was an old bank, and on every Wednesday we have community yoga, and the teacher for it standing is Tom Hauer, who was the first mindfulness teacher at the Crim Fitness Foundation. And then you can see the race is that Saginaw Street that you saw on the first slide is filled with 15,000 runners and many more spectators. And then some of the community gardens, and then our office area that just shows the Crim really believes that we need to be the change we're convening our community around. And so our CEO is very visionary about supporting all of us to be as healthy and mindful and compassionate as we can be, and try to do that within our organization as well. So we have a mindfulness room, we have mindful moments that are board meetings, and we every new employee spends 16 hours in a mindful leadership training program. So you might be curious where we are on this journey to become a more mindful city, or where we started. And just like Jackson, we started with listening. And next slide, please. We partnered with Tuck Business School in Dartmouth to help us do interviews and surveys. And we asked 137 leaders, what would a more mindful community look like? And so the response was more mindful, more compassionate, more resilient, more of a focus on sustainability. And they thought that a mindful city would be safe, equitable, healthy, and resilient. Next slide, please. And that just shows, again, some of the words that came up over and over from different leaders across different sectors. And I think intentionally inclusive is really important, because Flint has been one of the most segregated cities by income, by race. And so there's a large truth and racial healing and transformation project as well that we're walking alongside and learning from as we're, next slide, please. And this was our similar meeting to this, where we invited our mayor and city council members and community members. And Jim Gimian is the executive director of the Foundation for a Mindful Society. And he shared similar slides that Jackie shared today. And we weren't sure how it was going to go, and there was unanimous support from our mayor and the community members that were there that we should explore being a pilot city for mindful cities. And our mayor is in the red shirt with the gold necklace kind of in the center of that far right photo, Dr. Mayor Karen Weaver. And she's a psychologist by training and had used mindfulness practices in her own practice as well. And our CEO, Jerry Myers, is standing right next to her on the right. Next slide, please. So the next step was to build cross-sector engagement and support. And so we had a 2-day summit, and the CEO of Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, Rich Fernandez, and Michelle Maldonado came out and facilitated a workshop both to share about the research and teach a lot of practices and talk about how to build more mindful, compassionate leadership. And we also work to bring leaders together across sectors. And we were quite nervous how it was going to go, but 98% of the people that came said they found the training very valuable and were ready to apply some of the things that they learned. And we hosted the training in Factory 1, which is the top picture on the left. And it's a historic building because it was GM's first factory right along the Flint River, and it's now a beautiful event space. And we asked everyone at the training, many of them were leaders of different organizations in our community across sectors, and we said, would you like to train others in the community with this training? And we generated a wait list of 3,000 people. So there's definitely interest in our community. We don't quite have capacity to respond yet, but there's interest, so that's good. And we've really been blessed with a lot of local and national support for a lot of things in Flint, but mindfulness initiative as well. And the book on the left is a local and national expert. Some of you may have heard of Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, and she was one of the whistleblowers. She's a pediatrician who identified the high blood levels in her patients and really advocated for a public health response to the crisis. And so her book talks about her life as an immigrant and how the American dream worked for her and how it doesn't work for a lot of youth in Flint. And she talks about what public health interventions can be a response to it. And mindfulness is one of the many that she recommends. And she's on our advisory board. And Time magazine named her as one of the 100 most influential people in the world in 2016. She's really incredible. And John Kabat-Zinn is on the top. He came to Flint in 2016. Our CEO met him at a conference, and he said, I would like to come to Flint and help. And I think 3 months later, he really donated his time to come, and he founded the mindfulness-based stress reduction program, and he's stayed on our advisory board, so we just feel blessed to have his involvement. And Flint's a big sports town, so George Mumford is in the photo below, and he's worked with Michael Jordan and Phil Jackson, and so he came to Doyle Ryder, one of our elementary schools, and also did a big community event. And then the book on the right is another resource that may be of interest to some of you by Jonathan Rose, an urban planner and developer, and he talks about what a mindful city could look like and some of the basics that you need in place as well, like affordable housing is one of the key things that he mentions in the book too. So next slide. And this is just a picture of the authors of the book. That's Dr. Mona in the red in the center. This is in her office, and Jonathan Rose on the right. And this was during the launch event where we had a lot of national and local leaders in town. And so we visited the schools where we work and the farmers market and just took them around Flint. And if any of you would like to come to Flint, we would love to host and show you around as well. So in closing, just reflecting back and looking ahead, it's been a long journey in some ways, and in other ways it's moving forward and growing. And our aim is that by next year we'll launch we have a pilot project in education currently, and we've been working in small ways with all the other sectors. Like we lead mindful moments at city council meetings, and we'll go share practices with different organizations that are interested. I think we have our first business interested in a pilot project, and we hope to have a pilot project in all sectors by next year. And then we have mindfulness ambassadors in our community who have a deeper practice or experience or just passion around this topic and want to help be volunteers. And so we have 98 currently, but not in all sectors yet, a lot in education. And so we'd love to broaden that. And then our very bold goal in partnership with all the other initiatives in our community are to work to close the 15-year gap in life expectancy in our county. Babies born in inner city Flint have a 15-year shorter life expectancy than babies born just a few miles away. And so we know that mindfulness will not cure all of the ills that we're facing, but we do think it is a common thread that weaves a lot of the efforts together and creates space to really collaborate more effectively and be present for the challenges and the solutions. So deep gratitude from me and this is our full mindfulness team at the CRIM. We've had a growing team and they're just really incredible doing the work day in and day out, often in the schools, but at community centers and many places in our town. And so just wanted them to be in the room with you too.
Well, this is awesome, and thank you so much. And I'd say I'm humbled and also inspired, and with you being here and sharing your story. Just some of the thoughts, and I'll let other council members chime in, then we'll open it up for broader conversation. But, you know, I think of initiatives that we've undertaken that I think are defining for our future, and I would say one is Connection, our broadband, which we're currently in the midst of rolling out. We have our first customers, and that's a big initiative. And when you showed your timeline, starting in 2011, that's when that initiative started here at Futures Committee. And that's when we were asking the question, what does it mean to be a connected community digitally? And you know, with your timeline and just thinking about that and being a mindful city, I think this is the next big goal that we can pursue as a community. And, you know, I think we have a lot of the bricks in place, if you will, and a lot of wonderful things that we can build upon. One of the things we talk about during our retreat as a council, how we think of being a high-performing government, and that's not an oxymoron, but it's one that we can be very intentional about how we work together as a council and how we, with each other, and then with our city staff, and then with our community. And if we are high-performing, we believe that we are serving our community better. And so, and it's not always easy, and there's always challenges and how those things play out. But I think about that. I think about some of the initiatives that we've done, and I think we've made progress. One I'm thinking of is with Bloomberg, and more or less flipping the model of how do we engage our community, not at 6 o'clock necessarily at a council meeting, but really with every member of our community where they are, and how can we engage them purposefully and meaningfully with them. And you know, we've done a number of things that have, I think, touched on that. You know, one being 1,000 conversations, or 100 conversations. Another one being city as a platform for innovation, and so much more. And I think, and we talk a lot about our community being one of co-creators, that everyone in our community has a role in making our community a better place in all different sorts of things. It doesn't have to be the big heavy lift, but it can be the nice simple things that many times aren't, that go unseen. So the co-creator and collaboration, we you know, among other things, are featured at Smithsonian as a place of invention, and that story that's being told there is one of collaboration, and how that, what's the secret sauce that makes that happen, and that's one of the stories that's told there. but I think what you've brought to us today and you know, with being a university city, and I know that there's mindfulness efforts on campus as well as throughout our community, and you know, by seeing so many of our friends here, you know, I think that there's an opportunity to really bring a number of things together that does focus on mindfulness and being intentional about that as a community. And I thank Jackie for, you know, connecting the dots from the state of the city and to, you know, some of the things that we can build upon that we talk about the state of the city. So a lot of thoughts are running around, but I think that you being here is a special moment. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Julie and Emily if any comments you'd like to make.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming and for your presentations. So I actually have been a mindfulness practitioner for about a decade, off and on, and a few of my teachers, formal and informal, are actually in the room. What I'm having trouble wrapping my head around, and granted, both Emily and I are new council members, we were elected in April, is how the heck we would do that at a council session. So can you talk a little bit, I think, Sara Flitner, about what that looked like, and if there were any naysayers on council, like how were you just like, well, you can go stand over there, or what you did with that?
That's a great question. So we made it voluntary. We made, you know, basically when I knew we had an especially contentious meeting, which was about every other week, literally, you know, housing demonstrators, things that you're dealing with, real pain erupting in public meetings. And I saw in a month or two, like, we don't have the tools, the skills. This is real pain. It deserves voice, to Sarah's point. But we're not going to make progress like this. So I decided to use some neuroscience backing, got some curriculum. You have a lot of experts here. Trained our elected officials who want just minimum little doses, those who wanted to be trained. And then we basically would convene 15 minutes before a meeting would start. That's how we started it. What I noticed by about midway through the first year is people began to notice the meetings were different. So most of our colleagues, not everyone, because not everyone opts in, and that's okay, but it felt like this room feels, instead of that hyper-vigilant, triggered feeling where your constituents and your colleagues are not solving problems and not serving. They are, you know, in reactionary, defensive stance. Does that answer your question? Yeah, I could easily see, you know, starting with a breath or two, or even people are comfortable with intentions. So opening the meeting by, you know, reminding, you know, I just want to give people a moment to remember why they're here and how they want to engage with their neighbors in their community. And I want to thank them for, you know, we do some of that kind of like tricky stuff. I'm so happy to see, yeah, that you, right? It's just, you guys are inspiring.
And maybe if Sarah Sullivan can also share, because they do moments at their city council, if you just wanted another example.
Sure. So we were invited, my colleague and I from the CRIM, to go to our city council meeting, and it wasn't a weekly council meeting, but it was a training that they were having, but it was open to the public. And so we started just with a brief moment to arrive, taking a few deep breaths, and then we led a gratitude practice just to invite them to think about a moment that they have impacted a resident in a positive way, and then invited them to share that if they'd like. So we tried to just make it be something that could just start the meeting in a way that we might get invited back. And that was a few weeks ago. We haven't been invited back, but hopefully we will be soon too. So yeah, I think it's just offering an invitation, and you know, people can choose to be involved or not. But I do think, as Sarah said, it does often create a shift, and so it will build momentum.
Well, I would say that Julie stole my question. But, during your presentations, I very selfishly thought about how this affects me and how we can implement this as council members, and thinking about the tensions that we're having in our community as we're growing and, compounded nationally, and all the tensions that we're experiencing. And not only how do we bring it into council meetings, I think, we do have a lot of tense moments on council, but also I think about our listening sessions where we have people who want to come and talk to us personally in a group about issues they're very frustrated about. And I think that can also be very tense. And so I think about, that's also an opportunity to bring community members into that practice. I think having 10 to 20 people sitting around a table talking about some very serious issues, that's a great way to lead by example as council members. And I also think about supporting staff using these practices, especially as we explore more like the planning and development and all these really hard conversations that we're having with a lot of angry people and upset people. And so how do we bring this practice into those meetings and be able to support staff in that way? So I don't really have any questions. I just want to say thank you and what I was thinking about. And I'm excited to hear what some of these experts in the room, their questions and what their thoughts are.
And Julie.
Yeah, I just had one more. I figured you would take it, so I don't. So I want to talk about the equity a little bit, and maybe more about in Flint. I've noticed. So I went to a mindful leadership training at 1440 Multiversity last year, and it was fantastic. But I was like, wow, we are really white here. Can you talk about the outreach that you do, or maybe in both, to those communities that think of mindfulness as just kind of a middle class fad?
Yeah, so in Flint, I think that was the perception when we launched the programming in 2011. But we have slowly been just reaching out, and the CRIM is involved in all public schools in Flint, and through the race and all the other elements that the CRIM Fitness Foundation offers, we engage a very diverse community, and Flint is majority African American, and so we have strong relationships across all different sectors in our community. And so we've been inviting the ambassador program to bring in more diverse leaders. We've been also shifting our hiring practice from looking for certified yoga instructors who grew up in Flint to saying, like, if you are interested in mindfulness and would like to be paid to go through a yoga teacher training, early on in the first 6 months of your position here, that could work. So just being more creative instead of how do we meet people where they are and change our practices and policies so that we are being more inclusive and more relevant to the community. And I think also expanding the definition of mindfulness so that it's not only long extended practices, but it can be anything that helps people feel grounded and present and aware. And so co-creating with young people and with parents, what helps them relax in a stressful moment, or what things are they finding that help them step up in a compassionate way. So I think both the co-creation and then looking at our own organization and our hiring policies or practices, or just how we do outreach. We work with our Latinx community a lot and go to community centers. Our downtown is where our office is, and we weren't engaging North End Flint residents as much. So now we host community yoga at a North End elementary school, and we host mindfulness Mondays at rotating community centers around the community. So I think just looking where were the gaps and how do we change what we're doing to be more inviting and inclusive.
I would just add to that we're not a very diverse community. We are 2/3 white and 1/3 Latino, Latinx. And I'm grappling with this honestly because many of our Latinx community members are time starved. And, I was very proud at the summit that we had the leading Latinx the leaders of the 5 organizations that serve that population. But we had 3 Latina people in the room and 1 Latino. So we haven't cracked that code. And certainly, what keeps me up at night is this technology is available to anybody who can breathe or notice that their feet are planted on the floor. So what an opportunity that it's not about the fancy car or the best education or the most money, and you have access to high functioning cognition or contentment or stress abatement if you just get access to these practices. So we're looking at programmatically the same way, but I do just want to admit straight out, like, we have not cracked that code and we need to keep trying. Yeah.
I just have one other question, and Sarah Sullivan, particularly, talk about institutional partners within your community.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned University of Michigan, Ann Arbor has a branch there, and the hospitals, and so talk about how they come together.
Yeah. Sorry. So University of Michigan and Michigan State University both have small campuses in Flint. And so we first started working with them mainly for research purposes. We'd partner and offer the programming and invite them to research it. But their students have also started mindfulness groups and mindfulness councils on campus, and then have engaged in the Mindful Cities initiative in terms of training for their staff and colleagues. And so currently that's how we're collaborating with the universities. With hospitals, it's also emerging. They came to the 2-day summit and have interest in sharing these practices in their hospitals, but we haven't had capacity yet to follow up and provide programming. So we're in that phase of like having a lot of community interest in May, and then trying to decide how we can respond. The Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute program that we offered, myself and a colleague went through the 2-day teacher training so that we can offer that locally. So we're hosting our first training there in October. And then we're hoping to invite ambassadors, people who are really passionate from any institution or organization, to come together and represent the needs and help us co-create what will the programming look like for their sector or their business. And many have been cautious to say, I can't speak for the sector. And it's like, no, we just want all the voices that we, can start with, and we can do more outreach and engagement. But so it's still in its early stages, but there's mainly right now, it's just the interest and the willingness to come together and explore what would be possible.
Thank you. So if somebody would like to, in the audience, like to have a question, or if you would, we can share a microphone. So if you have a thought, like to contribute, Eric?
And then I think Eddie behind you.
Hi, Eric Holzapple. I just like to say that I'm just really excited. I've been practicing for about 25 years, and I brought it into our company and started at the partner level and started doing some workshops and things, and got the partners interested over the last 6 or 7 years. And then last year we brought MBSR in for, we have a small company, but 25, 26 people that everybody went through and did MBSR for 8 weeks, and we closed down 2 hours a week and half-hour a day for mindfulness. We're still closing a half-hour a day for mindfulness. About half of those folks have taken up practice at one time. We offer yoga twice a week. And I'm just really excited to see what's being done there and the interest with the city, because it meditating together and seeing others and collaborate and those kind of things, what really reinforces it. So I was excited enough to launch a leadership program this year based on mindfulness practices and community service. I had 18 people sign up for a year-long program. It's, anyway, go get them. It's good stuff. Thank you.
Eric,
and thank you for coming.
Eric, thanks for that. Can you just share with everyone what company you work for?
LC Real Estate and LC Home Building. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. I'm curious, this is off of the mayor's question about working with other institutions. I'm specifically interested in faith communities, especially those that have been practicing something that they didn't know was called mindfulness, contemplation, prayer, that kind of thing. And I'm mindful. I'm sitting next to my new friend who's from the Buddhist Shambhala Center, And so, how was that received? Were they like, hey, this is great, we've been doing this, let's get it bigger? Or were they like, huh, you're in our territory? So I'm just curious what your experience was with that.
So in Flint, we launched programming in the schools specifically. So we were very thoughtful about ensuring everything we were offering was secular, and really were cautious not to reach out to the faith community at first, almost intentionally, because we weren't sure, we just wanted to explore and determine how to engage with other community partners. And now it's been really fruitful to see different faith leaders reaching out and asking us to collaborate. And so we maintain everything we offer in a secular way, but often faith leaders will add prayer or add other religious aspects to it. But we're just sharing the general human capacities that we all share. And so that's how we've addressed it in our community.
Maybe Sara Flitner, if you want to share, because I know there was some faith representation at Becoming Jackson Hole.
So one of my advisory board members is an Episcopal minister. He does drop the F-bomb from time to time, so that might tell you a little bit about him. I went for you're okay, I forgive you. We went for leaders that people admired and respected and who wanted to be around. And I'm big on forgiveness, not permission. So I feel like the truth is, I don't know how to explain it to people who want to put a firewall up. A good leader is connected here and here. And what is the Joseph Campbell quote about the longest journey you'll ever take is from here, from head to heart. I think most people, if you're respectful, and that's foundational, if the intention is right, which is I really want to invite as many people into this conversation and collaboration as possible. So we are not experts. We are not commandeering what the program's going to be. We are none of that. We're purposely not adopting something like MBSR, though I love it and we resource it. We're just saying we know if we take a few deep breaths, there's a better way to do this, and that's what we're after. So to tell you the truth, I expected a lot more pushback, especially from the business community. They're running leaps and bounds, probably because of my background more than anything. But I was worried parents in the school district might have a negative reaction, and it could happen, but there's just nothing so far.
Hello? Okay, I guess I'm here. John Barbieri. And first, thank you very much, all of you who have made this possible. This is a wonderful, moist seed that just needs a little bit more warmth. I have a question for the police chief. It's one of the most extraordinary jobs to have. And it's filled with everything that we're talking about, actually. Fear, uncertainty, immediate response, reactivity. And so I'm wondering if you have done training or what you've tried to apply in terms of the mindfulness efforts, because it does strike me as something that could be extremely helpful.
Yes, we are just beginning our journey, I think. I listen to Teresa Roach a lot, and Jackie, who brings a lot to our executive leadership team, and I'm with here my deputy police chief, and one of my lieutenants is over here in the back as well. So I think as law enforcement leaders, we understand that we're human beings doing a tough job with other human beings, and I've taken a lot of notes here already today on that. And so we talk a lot about hiring for character, and then we train people, and we talk about things can be lawful but awful, and so making sure that we lead with our hearts and not necessarily with the law book, and we're not law enforcement officers as much as we're peace officers. And so I think just starting with that kind of as our header, we're beginning the journey. But I think if you hire good people who understand that and want to lead in a way that is with others and not telling others type of thing, I think will go a long way. So I'm excited about this. And so when we were excited, I know Jackie reached out specifically to us, and I was excited that she did, because I think she knows that we're all in this endeavor.
Thank you. Sounds really good.
Anyone else? Yeah, please, Rich.
I think it's important to hear what Poudre School District is trying to
Can you get him a mic, please?
Yeah. So he asked, interested in what Poudre School District is doing, so please.
Okay, well, Poudre School District is also interested in what you guys are doing as well. And so right now, Amanda, myself, both members of the Mindful Council, we're basically trying to create and educate our staff, our students, through wellness, just about basically tools that are free and available for them to help them be a more fully regulated self when they show up. And that's one of the best gifts that we can give each other. I'm just curious, though, where right now, just a snapshot in time, where things are at with your school districts, and then also where are you hoping that it goes?
So in Flint, we are supporting 6 school districts in the county and 23 schools. So we are working very closely and intensely with 3 pilot schools to do the most programming and evaluation and research, but then offering general support and training to the other schools. And so what we've seen is in the schools where we've provided the most staffing and have a mindfulness room or a resiliency room where students can come and take a few minutes to find whatever they need to help self-regulate before they go talk to the principal or before they have a restorative justice circle. It helps all of those outcomes improve. And so that's where we've seen the suspension going down. We've seen the schools that have the most staff training and parent engagement have the highest outcomes because that consistent message at home and at school is so helpful and supportive. And we've made access to apps and online curriculums available, but we've really found that when teachers are just sharing tools that they find helpful with their students, that's most authentic and most successful. And we'd love to do more with student leadership and having older students teaching younger students. We had a young boy whose teacher wasn't really that impressed with mindfulness at first, and this young man had a rough summer, and when he came back from 2nd grade, he went back to his 1st grade teacher and said, you know, Mrs. Jones, can you show my new teacher that thing with the bell, because she doesn't know it and I really am struggling and I just want to do that thing with the bell. And so his 1st grade teacher went over to the 2nd grade teacher and they invited the student to share it with the class. And so he just rang a bell and everyone listened to it and focused their attention that way. And so we were just inspired by how simple a lot of the practices are that young people could teach them well. It's just taking the time and energy to do that well. So I'd say that's our next step, is to support more young people leading this.
Hi, Amanda. I apologize for being late. I was actually teaching mindfulness to a group of high school students, and we teach until 4. So my question for you is, did you start with student explicit instruction, or did you start with teacher explicit instruction? And did you have any barriers for classrooms that teachers might not have been on board with?
Yeah, so we did start with student explicit instruction, and so our staff went into the classroom, and I've only been at the CRIM for 2 years, and so Tom, who you saw in the photos, was the first mindfulness educator at the CRIM, and he'd been a PE teacher for 30 years, and he was also a yoga instructor, and so he joked that he was used to riling the kids up, not helping them focus and calm down, but he was beloved by every school he went to, and that was really positive, and the lessons had a great impact, and that's where the pilot studies came from, is his work. But the challenge was then when his 12-week sessions were over, I don't think a lot was continuing beyond that, and it was seen more the CRIM comes to do something, and so we've kind of switched our approach now to say when possible, it's most effective if we can do the staff training first and parent training. And we're trying to explore maybe in simultaneous with youth leaders that are interested, so that it is just something that becomes part of the routine and the school culture, and not something that someone from the outside needs to come in and offer.
We're focusing on teachers with our organization. Our community our hospital's wellness program started a pilot program with the 5th grade about 5 years ago, and that has expanded up as those 5th graders have gone for the same reason that Sarah referred to. I am personally focusing my efforts on championing the work and the leaders in the community who are doing it. One of the private schools does 10 minutes in the morning, first thing, school-wide. Again, I don't think that there's a right way or a wrong way. The way that we're trying to show support is amass resources, understand what the Board of Education's budget is, and how to allocate some of the wellness dollars for programs like this. Especially in our community, there's a huge amount of support for teacher resilience training. Like Fort Collins, we have a high cost of living and high turnover, and that costs the district and the community money. Not to mention a teacher with 3 years of experience compared to one with 10, or please tell me you have more than 3 years of experience. Okay, good. We're losing some wisdom and some of that mentoring capacity. So those are some of the things we're doing. There's a great curriculum out of Sun Valley through the Flourish Foundation. If you've heard of that, they work with schools. So any resources that we have or anything that any of you hear, I think for sure Jackie has our emails. Just shoot us an email and we'll share whatever we have.
Please.
Thank you very much for this very inspiring presentation. And it's such a great to see such a response from our community and participation. On behalf of the Center for Mindfulness at CSU, Colorado State University, we welcome the opportunity to co-create as you navigate forward with mindful cities and anything mindfulness related. We have 10 leadership team members, and they have a wide reach in the community and also get invited in and try to meet people where they are. So it doesn't have a certain look or shape where it's emergent. So as we meet children in the young ages all the way to our OSHER members who are seniors and ARP members, and everything in between. My entry point, I was a emergency responder for hazardous materials for 15 years, worked closely with fire and police, and 9 of those years were with the city of Fort Collins. And I had a lot of post-traumatic stress right after 9/11. They would call me out for every cooler, bucket, battery that was left in a parking lot, and I started having trouble sleeping and some of the problems that go with that kind of stress. So I really can see where these would be invaluable tools. What's happening on our campuses across the country, I would guess globally, is that we now have what's called an epidemic of anxiety, stress, and depression, high rate of suicide. This is happening all over the country. They just started using the word epidemic recently. So we're trying to find ways to widen our reach and be able to offer these tools in the simplest way possible, and with as many people that want to be trained to share these. So we're wide open in partnering and really appreciate the city's leadership on this initiative, and welcome any way to partner and co-create. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mark,
Thank you. I just wanted to give a little bit of my own experience as a teacher. I was teaching Mandarin Chinese in Wyoming at Buffalo at Buffalo High School, and also at middle school in Casper. And it wasn't even a second thought for me to have 5 minutes of mindfulness before every class. And I found that when I did that, I led my students just before we would start class in 5 minutes of focusing on the breath, counting the breath 1 to 10. And the classes were basically very well controlled, or whatever is the right word. But the one thing that was really interesting was when I was at, I think it's CJ Middle School in Casper. that through doing that, then I had some of the teachers who were dealing with some of the more difficult students come and ask me if I would work with them. So during my off time, then they would come up and I would work with them for 5 minutes, and then we also started working together with them. I would go to their classes and help them go through some different mindfulness practices, mindful walking, mindful breathing, and just awareness of the breath. And they were noticing some amazing changes. And so working with students, I think, is so important, giving them that experience early on, helping them to connect to that inner experience that I think that you were talking about, Sarah. It's, I think, one of the most incredible and most important experiences that we can give to them. Thank you.
I should know how to do this. I used to be on city council. Never did get that. But anyway, I also would like to thank Jeff and Jackie and both of you, Sarah and Sarah, for this amazingly inspiring presentation today. I chair a homeless initiative in Fort Collins, and I would like to get your information so that we don't have to talk about it here, what you do. And Jeff, I think it would also be great, Chief, to talk about it, because there's so many interactions between the police, of course, and people experiencing homelessness. And I know that John Barbieri has done some work, and just to make it continuous, I think would be amazing. So to learn what you guys have done with that, or what you've heard in other communities, I would be really interested in that. So I'll be contacting you. I'll get your information from Jackie.
Thank you, Chris. And I think we're at the point now where we're about to wrap up. And I would just like to take a moment to dedicate, when we're talking about gratefulness. In the past week, we lost a community member, Jack Daniels, and he was 97 years old, and he would come to council meetings, and he would stand up during public comment and just say how grateful he was for our community. And he would thank council members and thank our community and thank our city staff, and he did it in the most sincere way. And anyway, I think that's fitting for closing out our conversation. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jackie to summarize, and then I think there might be some to do. So.
Wow. Thank you for that, Mayor. I was already so moved by all of this, and yeah, Jack might have been one of the original mindful moments, and because he paused, that and maybe our symphony friends too,
Yep,
but just kind of
right.
challenged the flow of the meeting, and with gratitude and love of his city, which is amazing. So I wanted to start too with some gratitude for Brittany, because she was multitasking, like dueling keyboards over there, And as you all know, Megan is often my partner at Futures, and Brittany was really excited about this topic and said, I'll help for this one. So thank you so much to Brittany. And Mary, you opened by saying humbled and inspired, and just wanted to kind of put an exclamation point, underline that, and I'd say both by our visitors. Just I was exposed to these stories, and now to kind of bring them back home has been really beautiful experience. But then just so humbled and inspired. Who showed up? I mean, this is your Monday evening, and that you were curious about the future of a mindful, compassionate Fort Collins, I think just says so much about you and our community. So a few things that I wanted to touch on, because this is a council futures committee. I think that there's a lot of intersections I'm hearing related to council's 20 adopted priorities in regards to reimagining community engagement, high-performing board or high-performing council, how you lead by example, how you interact with one another, and as well as kind of some of the things we have ongoing, our approach to co-creation, city as a platform, how we're working in terms of homelessness, what might council meetings, how might those look different, our listening sessions, how our staff too is equipped with different tools and these tough conversations that we're having with our community and with community partners. I'm really grateful to thanks, Chief. You didn't know by inviting you that we get questions too. But I want to say that in his first week, I think here, he came to my mindfulness class, which is so awesome. I was like, wow, I'm so excited for our new chief. And we've actually, all of our executive lead team retreats, we have mindfulness practice at those. I just want you all to know that about your city's executive team. I led a mindfulness practice with 400 of our managers at our all managers meeting. So we're early in this space too, but we're trying to figure it out. And I wanted to just share too that this wasn't meant to be a prescriptive night. That's what Futures is all about. It's the one time kind of we as staff and with our elected officials just get to dream and imagine, aren't necessarily proposing options or recommendations of policies, but more just imagining what our future, what we want it to be with our community and what seeds we plant now. And so, as the mayor said, that there's been seeds in the past that have come to beautiful fruition, and are now part of your life here in Fort Collins. And so, excited to hear the response from our council and all of you that, the great work that's already happening here in our schools with CSU, in the health sector, in some of our businesses. There's much to build on already here. And so, I think that potential next steps is, the first cohort of this is already off and running, and I think we were talking about they're flying the plane as they design it, and so we'll be keeping our attention on and learning from them and perhaps Parkland, Florida as well, and I hope that more connections. I know CSU and Margit, you're going to be meeting with Sarah and Sarah tomorrow morning, and so maybe more cross-learnings will happen in this room with these other cities, but also amongst us. There might be friends here that you knew in another way, but you didn't know you shared a mindfulness practice with that person. So stay tuned as we kind of explore, I think, as an organization with our elected officials and then as partners, where we continue to grow this effort. I definitely say my heart warmed when the mayor said, maybe this is another goal for us to think about in terms of a mindful, kind, compassionate community and just the presence that we all have to bring our best selves to for the love of Fort Collins. So I think that's it, Mayor.
Well stated. Thank you, and thank you, Sarah and Sarah. Been a real delight. So with that, we'll close out tonight, and thank you so much.